word to the wise, we are an explicit podcast tackling choicey adult themes as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us in this section we're reading. And Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. You can think of us as your drunk weekly book club.
And to kick that off, we're going to do something right now that we usually do right before we start recording. And Crossland, I challenge you to a shot.
Yeah, this is our inaugural episode that you guys are hearing, so we are absolutely taking a shot on air. What are you taking a shot of?
Bullet Rye.
All right.
It's kind of a go-to for mine.
I have a shot of Rakia, so.
Ooh, nice.
Little vodka. Cool. All right. 3, 2, 1. Downy the hatch. Ooh. There we go. All right. So today we'll be discussing part 1 of Red Rising, subtitled Slave. But first, let's talk about what we're drinking. What are you having, PJ?
So I intentionally didn't tell you what I'm drinking because I have a question for you. We talk regularly about 2 ingredients is just desperation, not a cocktail. Yep. Mine has 2 ingredients, but one of them is kind of a combo ingredient.
Okay.
I will explain. Mine is rum. It's a Kilo Kai rum. It's a spiced Caribbean rum from Curacao, I believe. And then to mix in with it, I have Diet Dr. Pepper and cream soda.
So wait, it's Diet Dr. Pepper and cream soda flavored Dr. Pepper. So it came out of one can.
It's one can. But it's not cream soda flavored Diet Dr. Pepper. It's Diet Dr. Pepper ampersand cream soda.
So I'm going with that's desperation because you only mix 2 vessels.
All right.
like even if you used margarita mix.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Margarita mix.
So here's what I had. Obviously this leads into that. So I'm having a spicy jalapeno margarita with Camarena tequila, which was not in the picture. And orange juice. So,
okay.
Yeah. That's
gotcha. You sneaky devil.
Yeah, so I've got 3. Plus ice cubes.
I don't have ice cubes either. I was running late today. To chase this, I have Shooter McGavin from Barrel Theory. This is one of my favorite breweries. I believe it's one of your favorite breweries in Minnesota as well.
Yeah, they're great.
St. Paul, Minnesota. Really, really awesome. Everything they do is kick-ass. Yeah.
Yeah,
do you have anything following up?
Oh, yeah, my chaser is Kitten Biscuit from Wilmington Brewing Company, one of my favorite brewing companies down here. So they've got a line of beers that are effectively different variations of confections plus cats. So their lead beer that kind of, I don't want to say made them famous, but their lead beer that really kind of broke them out as a critically acclaimed brewing company was called Lion Cake, and it is amazing. It's like a 10.2% double IPA. It's just fantastic. It's my dad's favorite beer on the planet. It's great. And so they've started to make variations because they don't think that they can get the same ingredients to make the same thing. So they've been doing spins on it by changing the recipe lightly, and so they've been going around. So this one is Kitten Biscuit as opposed to Lion Cake. So
that's a big problem within the brewing community. If you're using if they put that out a few years ago and they had a pretty obscure hop that suddenly became really, really popular, it's probably impossible for them to get right now in a large enough quantity. So, or it's just prohibitively expensive.
Yeah, I think they just made the judgment call to discontinue it and then to do this kind of playing around the Lion Cake and messing with the flavor profile.
I love that idea. It really allows you to showcase. It gives you a baseline for what the beer tastes like, and then it allows you to showcase the hops and how hops can really change the entire experience of a beer. So swapping out, we're brewing our New England again soon, and we're gonna swap out Citra for Strata just to see what it does. We've got 2 other hops in there, but that should be the kind of the lion's share of the hop flavor that comes through. And I did say lion on purpose. But it's fun for the brewers and the consumers alike, I feel like. So I think it's a good idea, and I applaud them for that.
Yeah, it's pretty great, and they make kick-ass beer, so would recommend.
I'm excited to come visit you sometime. As soon as it gets really cold here, I'm leaving.
Yeah, it's always
And
great here.
I'm
It's
gonna
like
go
70
visit you.
all the time. So with that, let's get into the book. But before we kind of really dive deep into the book, I have to quickly clarify. We talked in our first episode, in our intro episode of the book. You haven't read a whole lot of fiction lately, and haven't read a whole lot in a long time. When was the last time that you read a long, sprawling series? Like Harry Potter, maybe?
Nope, haven't.
Okay. Just trying to give a gauge.
Aragon.
Okay.
Yep.
Did you finish all 4 books?
No, I stopped reading before the 4th one came out.
Okay. Me too, to be fair, because I lost interest after I've read 3, and I was like, wow, this is not a whole lot.
Actually, it's probably hard to gauge which one was. It was probably around the same time that I read all of the Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
Anyway, let's get on to the book.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
We're here to discuss.
So we tackle kind of an introduction, and even, I mean, by most standards, a bit of an info dump section, because we are being introduced to a crazy different world. This isn't like a typical fantasy world by any stretch, but we do kind of experience the classic trope of the like fantasy info dump right off the bat. Mm-hmm. So we read the intro last week, but on the very first page, there's a line that stands out to me. Was there anything that stood out to you on that first page?
Oh, so you have to pull the feet to break the neck?
Yeah. Just brutal. On Mars, there's not much gravity, so you have to pull the feet to break the neck. They let the loved ones do it. And, man, every time I read that line.
The word let kind of haunted me a little bit. Because I didn't know if he meant actually, like, for the sake of, like, the last rites of the family, letting them, like, allowing them to do this, or if it was more of a forced thing. It seemed like it was more of a compassion thing than a force thing, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's totally compassionate. It's definitely because they don't want to see the struggle continue, and so they pull the feet to break the neck so that they don't have to witness them like writhing forever and ever until they actually die, as opposed to old hanging, which at the very least is a quicker death, provided everything happens. But you know, if you can't break the neck, then boof, the whole thing is out the window.
Speaking, I'm going to get a little bit, I mean, not that far ahead, but a little bit ahead because it relates to this. Talking about what do they call it? The Devil's Dance. Mm-hmm. It felt a little bit spoon-fed.
Which, this line?
How much, well, just in general, throughout the book, or throughout this section, specifically the first part of it, how much he described and, like, had to kind of explain what he was talking about instead of just letting us know that, like, the Devil's Dance was them hanging and flailing. I know this is probably directed a little bit, not necessarily towards, like, just straight up adult fiction, just based on the vocabulary isn't advanced. I'm assuming it's probably more directed towards, like, late teen, early adult fiction. So I get it, but it did kind of take away from the storytelling to have to describe. That's what we call the Devil's Dance when they're flailing while they're hanging. Like, we knew that. You could have just let the imagery go.
Yeah, so I'll speak to 2 things, and I do think that it's important to be critical, especially, I think, of this book most of all, because this book is really him kind of finding any sort of footing. A little bit of background on Pierce Brown. He wrote something like, I think, 6 or 7 books before this, had trouble getting them published. At the time that he sold Red Rising, finally after, I think, 46 publishers, like, he struggled hard to get even representation. He ended up selling it, and really, he was 26 years old, and he also didn't know, you know, what he wanted to do or where he necessarily wanted to go with the story completely. He is very much a discovery writer, and this reads the closest to what I'd call, you know, in the very front of the book, it does say Ender, Katniss, and Darrow. It does read the closest to those books out of them all. Like you said, it's kind of towing that line between adult fiction and high school, young adult fiction. This is the only book that toes that line. It quickly abandons it.
Good to know.
In book 2 and book 3 and book 4 and book 5. But yeah, it definitely does not read like Game of Thrones in the sense of the like utter brutality and the way that like rape happens and everything else in this book. But that's not to speak of developments that come. So
my other comment on sort of theme and style, it reads almost like robotic Shakespearean dialogue. I don't know if that gets shaken also, but that was a little bit weird and jarring, but maybe that was intentional because it kind of fit the weird and jarring situation that they've found themselves in.
His style is going to be more Shakespearean than someone like Michael Crichton or Blake Crouch, but that's not to say that this intro section doesn't have a particular flavor because it needs to have a particular flavor. It definitely is trying to evoke an Old English Irish feel. It's supposed to make you kind of think of the old country, and so a lot of that is a very particular vocabulary combined with flowing sentences that don't say a whole lot, but give you a sense of character. And that specifically kind of rolls through this section, feeds into the next, and then kind of disappears as the dialogue and all of the talking and all of the talking about things lends more to the plot and less to the description of the world. Like I said, this is totally, like, this first 50 pages more than anything else is a info dump on what the world is.
Yeah, I can see that. And that makes total sense.
And it could have been done better. I think it's important to critique it because it definitely could have, like you said, you don't need to say that it is the Devil's Dance. We can infer it.
I mean, you can call it the Devil's Dance, but then don't immediately describe or explain what it is. Like, let the imagery speak for itself a little bit.
Totally agree. I love, just opening up with that utter brutality on the first page, the like absolutely haunting image of like him breaking his dad's neck. Like right off the bat, just like leaning into it. So the Reds of Lycos are proud young workers, starting as early as age 13, doing dangerous work. What do you think of the whole Helldiver claw drill scene?
I wish there was a little bit more description of the machinery itself. It left so much up to the imagination that I didn't really have a clear image of what he was operating. If that makes sense. Like he talks about 10 drills, but doesn't really talk about how they're oriented or the cockpit that he's sitting. Like there's a lot of machinery there that sounds really fucking cool, but I have no idea how it's set up.
Yeah, I think he does go into a little bit of description. I paid a lot of attention to it this time around, this being the second time through the book. It is described as like a very long, up to like I think it said up to a kilometer, which just felt insane to me. But it is obviously clawing through the crust. The seat is no more than like a literal chair on the very top, and really it's just mounted with the hand operations, with a literal like glove that he wears.
That was the other thing. It's like 10. I'm assuming each drill is operated by one of his fingers, but that articulation also didn't really translate to text.
Yeah, so if you kind of imagine your hand, you're like palms together in a glove was the way that it made me think of it as he described it, and then you're kind of working your hands through the earth like you yourself are clawing through them, is the way that I read it this time, but I also went through very carefully to get that. It was not that clear. I do definitely agree and understand. But it is a crazy thing.
It was also really like, it was a topic, like the idea of a machine like that was very interesting to me, and I wanted more just
you are
description.
An engineer,
I wanted more description of it. But I understand that like that just feeds directly into my interests. Yeah. So it's not necessarily a requirement.
Yeah. And we get like a lot of things introduced here, and we kind of get introduced to the labeling style, so to speak, of the words, Helldiver or fry suit, with the S in suit being capitalized, B in sling blade.
Yeah, it's camel case. It's starting like lowercase, but it's camel case. Yeah,
which is interesting, and it lets you pick out a word that would normally be just a noun, so it wouldn't really matter. Like if I wrote sickle, you'd be like, oh, well, I know what that is because of learned over time. So it's interesting to like have it be lowercase and then uppercase just to call your attention to it, to remember almost. It's an interesting writing bit.
I'd be interested to learn later on. My guess about this, that is derived from programming languages and the naming of variables, because they're typically in a lot of circles and a lot of syntax, that's the quote-unquote correct way to write your variables if they use multiple words. So
Oh yeah,
after the first word, each subsequent word starts with a capital letter, making it look like a camel.
makes sense.
Um,
Humps between the words. Yeah, that makes
exactly.
sense.
So my guess, if it's not part of the lore of the book itself, it was derived from programming languages. I'm not sure of Pierce Brown's programming background, if he has any, but
I don't know about programming, but he was a political scientist for a couple of years, worked in several political campaigns.
okay.
That's-
So he
that
probably
is-
dealt with like data sets and data aggregation, and maybe not directly, but worked with data miners probably. So I bet he was exposed to some programming.
Of course. So we also get our first scene of Darrow, on the claw drill, jumping down to do an inspection for a gas pocket to make sure that it's not going to get everyone, in some kind of an explosion of helium-3, which is what they're down there mining, for the purpose of treating the surface so that it can be habitable one day.
Right. From the introduction, we know that's bullshit.
Yep. Or at least we get the preclusion that it's bullshit.
Right. I mean,
He could be on a different planet.
I thought it explicitly said that it was a lie.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right.
I think he did. Well, I know he did because I was thinking about it the whole time, and I haven't read anything like spoilery.
Well, until you get to the end, and then you're kind of spoilery, because that's the whole thing.
I mean, I haven't read outside information other than what we've read on this podcast and talked about. So I know going into this that it's bullshit, but really cool descriptions nonetheless.
So what did you think of the, obviously he's jumping down the fry suit, he's taking care of that, he's competing to win this laurel. For me, in the first read, this read, especially with like the lead text and the very little that I had read about the book, it read like, oh, okay, so this book is going to be about competing for the laurel in this claw drill situation. They're going to like strive for it and whatever, and they're going to, go through some struggles, and then kind of on the outset it'll be, taken from him, and then we'll get book 2.
What do you mean by book? Do you mean like this section?
Well, not necessarily. Like it preambles.
Or do you mean
do
you mean Red Rising the novel? Or
yes,
do you mean,
Red Rising the novel, right?
Okay.
Reads as this is maybe this is our Hunger Games to some degree. It almost leads in like a preamble.
The introduction
Mm-hmm.
kind of took that away. I felt like if I hadn't read that first, I think I'd be on your side, or like I'd be on the same page. But having read the introduction and having like seen where he will end up.
Okay, so you've got the path, you've got the progress, you've got the goal in your head. Thinking through
Yeah,
this.
exactly.
Got it.
Thinking through that. I've already kind of got the progression.
Got
and
it.
that gets fucked up eventually in this section.
Yeah.
At the end of the section.
Right.
But
What'd you think about the laurel on the whole? In like the
oh,
concept
I knew he wouldn't win it. I knew they wouldn't award it to him. I don't trust government at all.
It almost seems more like a corporate thing. Less like it's government, more like it's a corporation, right?
They're run the same way though.
Well, yeah.
In this because of how overarching it is and because of how
pervasive the caste society is, yeah.
Exactly. So even if it is a single corporation running it, it is running it like a government.
Sure.
None of which should be trusted. And
that's fair.
And the fact that a single clan has won the laurel every time, and the older people are so jaded about it, tells me that they're not jaded because they keep losing and aren't motivated enough to win. They're jaded because they probably experienced something like this before.
Right. And the youngest group doesn't believe it, but someone's got to be the lead horse, the carrot to chase, and so that's their place.
Exactly.
Which is especially interesting when we actually get to the laurel bit later with the two houses that get punished, right, for not achieving their goals, despite the fact that they couldn't because of the explosions that ruined both of their mining crews.
Yeah.
And it's like extra.
Was
punishment.
it one explosion that killed both of them?
No. They each experienced over the course of the quarter.
Okay. So that was the other thing. That was the other thing that was completely unclear. Was how often the laurel was awarded.
Quarterly. It said quarterly.
Maybe I must have just missed the quarterly thing.
Got it.
Because I had no sense of scale. So I must have just happened to miss the quarterly part of it. Because I didn't know if it was a nightly thing. I didn't know if it was a weekly thing or a monthly thing or a yearly thing. Like I had no sense of scale of how important this was or how long of a time this affected them.
Yeah. So we can get into that later because I've got more kind of on the laurel. But we do get from Darrow, even in this mine shaft, we get him thinking about his wife, Io. Which
so Io, you pronounce it the same way I do.
Yep.
That's what I figured, but
it's how it's pronounced in the audiobook. It's also the actual Irish pronunciation, because all of these.
Oh, that's an actual name?
Yeah, these are all derived, like Neril and everything else. They're all derived from older Irish names. The Reds are really supposed to be kind of an allegory for this like working low class, and that's why they kind of have the sort of Irish demeanor about them in terms of working, family unit, drinking, and also the kind of religion that is work.
Yeah, and
the adherence structure is very much built off of the backs of the Irish in this case,
and the red hair.
Yep, right. No, it's all that's all. He's very straightforward with it. He's like, when I was thinking about it, I was like, the Irish, like this is exactly, and that's a great attitude to kind of imbue into characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Io is interesting though.
Yeah. That you could say that again.
Yeah. So
she is a very interesting girl.
So let's start from the beginning, real quick. So like from waiting, the first real nugget you get is that in society, women, in this society, in the Red Society, women typically marry at 14. And she chose to wait for Darrow, specifically, because men don't marry until 16.
Right.
What else you got?
So that was something I had to sort of slowly not ease myself into, but get my mindset around. In that he refers to Uncle Neril as the old man of the tribe, and he's like 34.
Yep.
Like we have friends that are 34.
Yeah, right.
They're as like bullshit as we are, and we're in our mid-20s. Well, I mean,
yeah, as it
are
is.
we late 20s now? I don't know.
20s,
whatever. So. Knowing that, like, this is probably a factor of living on Mars, it's and living in the conditions that they do. They're probably living a very, very hard life and dying very young.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense to marry basically as soon as they're like. Maybe almost through puberty, for the betterment of the society itself.
Yeah,
but they were children. Like I remember being 16 and dating girls. I wasn't ready. I'm not ready to get married now. I learned that the hard way.
Ooh. I think what's very interesting here on the surface between Io and Darrow really comes down to kind of that naive love that you talked about. Like it does, there's like hints of naivety, but there's also a very strong passion. I do agree with you that it does kind of have that almost high schooler glow in the eye.
Yeah, it does.
But at the same time, there are individual lines that are written, especially a little bit later in the scene in the garden, where it doesn't read like that. It truly reads like crazy passion. And so you're kind of caught between like, is this they're growing up, they're still like hitting.
I still got high school love out of it though.
I don't think a high schooler writes like that or thinks like that. But yeah,
I don't know, man. Making love out in the in the Forbidden Garden, like that's absolutely a teenager thing to do.
well, okay. But if it like it's, I guess it's a little bit different because, all right, so let's make the allegory here. We're kind of skipping ahead, but if they're making love in the Forbidden Garden, there's the first drunk slayer. If they're making love in the Forbidden Garden, that is to a high schooler relationship. Like there's no knowledge that this thing exists. It's as though.
That's true.
Like,
that's a good point.
It is fundamentally different because this is not real. So that'd be like taking a teleporter in high school to Mars and being able to fuck on Mars. Like that would be the closest thing that I can imagine.
I would have done that.
Well, of course, I'm not questioning whether or not you would have done it. It's really just a question of like, you know, the scale of the seriousness of what's going on around them.
I'm with you. Like, yeah, you're right. It's not a direct comparison, but I didn't necessarily like they're definitely living much more mature than they should be if they were regular teenagers on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they were necessarily so incredibly advanced in their emotional states.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, it was very much young passion.
Definitely.
I felt like.
Totally agree with that. I totally think that's on with the overall feeling. What else, do you have any other feelings on her and the relationship without diving into later substance stuff? Nah.
Yes, but not in a way that I can really
articulate. You want context.
Well. It needs context.
Yeah, okay. So, moving forward, one of the things that strikes me going from kind of the introduction, talking to Brown about the way that he pictures the surface of Mars, how do you picture what everything looks like right now from Darrow's perspective?
Caves, like just cavernous darkness. I didn't catch any sort of illumination other than the HC, which I can't remember what it stands for right now.
Oh, conveniently, I've created something where you can go look at it. HC stands for holocan, which is the equivalent of a TV.
Yep.
To be fair, I read through 5 books and didn't know what an HC was, but inferred that it was a TV after 5 books.
Well,
so.
yeah, I knew it was a TV.
I just meant I didn't know that it was called holocan.
Yeah, no,
I missed it.
I knew it was in there. I just couldn't remember. Yeah. I interpreted it as like Jumbotron.
Yeah.
Like just a big sports stadium, like 4-paneled TV box that sits way above.
Yeah, or like 1984 style, right? Like that's the image that I get.
Something like that too. Okay. Yeah, I got Jumbotron.
Yeah, but I mean, they're
either
similar.
Way, that seems to be the only source of illumination for a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's true. I'm sure there's other sources of light, but that's the only one that really gets described.
Mm-hmm.
So everything seemed very bleak,
dark and solemn.
Just in my imagery, very like dirty, subterranean, like dwarf-like society.
Yeah, talking about fantasy elements. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, there's the map at the beginning.
Oh yeah, don't look. I mean, you can look at that, but
I haven't like I meant to look at it, to see where like they were in relation to other clans. Are they on here, or is this like surface level
this
stuff?
this is entirely different.
Okay.
Yeah.
I won't take a look at it yet.
Well, I mean, you can. You just won't get it.
I've looked at it, but I won't like really dig into it yet.
Yeah, so all intents and purposes, it's fine to see that front map. It's good to like keep that in the back of your head that there is something else that's looming that you're kind of keeping track of. The way that everything moves is cool. And I think the telltale sign of getting invested in a fantasy story is looking at the map in the front and being like, ooh, shit, absolutely. This is really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and like, how do you pick out the stuff?
That's what I love about Tolkien is all his maps.
Yeah, and maps are definitely a thing.
Yep.
Here. So, yeah, like I said, this is almost like a science fantasy book as opposed to science fiction, but it is also science fiction. It blends the genres together very well, which we see throughout this chapter even. So we do get to kind of the king, ruler, overlord, right? We get presented with the sovereign talking down 1984 style out of the HC, like you were talking about, the giant jumbotrons. And I love, there's a line that kind of foreshadows the universe writ large. Where first shall we flourish? Venus, Mercury, Mars, the moons of Jupiter, Neptune. That's on page 17. And then near the end of that, it's brave pioneers. Always remember that obedience is the highest virtue. Above all, obedience, respect, sacrifice, hierarchy. That just screams 1984 Orwellian.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm dribbling like a motherfucker out of this crowler.
Yeah, I can't hear it, so you're good.
Oh, it's less about you hearing it and more about me just getting really frustrated and barely paying attention.
It's fair.
To what you're saying. I am paying attention though. But
so I feel like that foreshadows it though, right? Like, okay, so we have all of these planets. We know that the moons are in play. Where are we gonna go in this story? Where do you think we go?
Sorry. I have to stop you and call out a dumb fucking thing that you put on our notes document. Mars helium-3 driller under Mars surface. MAR''S.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you doing, Crossland?
Dude. Mars is surface. It's fine. Mars owns the surface.
Mar doesn't own the surface.
Where is this in the document?
Terms, groups. Helldiver.
A helium-3.
A helium-3.
Mars's. You're right. It should have been Mars's, and I don't know why it wasn't. Okay, anyway.
I think it can just be Mars''.
It actually corrected me because it's a proper noun, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Never mind.
That was the recommendation. Anyway,
I always write your name when I'm talking possessive with you. It's KROSS''.
That
I didn't know that
I think
possessive
that's the
nouns
2S.
didn't follow that rule.
No, I think that's the 2S rule. Like if there are 2 S's. Anyway,
so
maybe
yeah.
I don't know. I'll look it up. That's actually something I should.
English sucks,
dude. I have been relearning grammar as a part of writing so much, and that is. Yeah, there are a number of things. In our notes, I care less about it, though, so stop giving me shit.
Let's just learn Russian.
Nope.
I don't know.
Fuck Russian. Anyway, so, yeah.
I got friends that have degrees in Russian. I think they hated themselves when they decided to do that.
So,
anyway.
the brave pioneers always remember obedience is the highest virtue. Above all, obedience, respect, sacrifice, hierarchy. Yeah, it's these things, blah, blah, blah. That just, it reads like pure government propaganda, right? This is
in an unbelievable kind of way.
What do you mean?
Like, it unbelievable in that, like, how long has this been going on, and how slowly did they ramp up in order to get people to actually believe this?
Yo, dude, I don't want to tell you anything, but I don't know if you've seen the president tweet out Law and Order, and all the other people go along with they're not supporting Law and Order, but like that is I call it out later in the notes.
Yeah.
It's just
all right. Good point.
Yeah, I know, right? Like I got frustrated when I read that part of this book, and I'm like, when was this published? I had a momentary lapse of reality.
Good.
We'll get to it later because I've actually got it quoted, and I was like, whoa. Anyway, so we also find some other interesting seeds of what's to come planted here, from the presentation of Io not going to her flush, which is like an air shower, still being dirty because she, headed up on the girders.
I really like the description of the flush.
Yeah.
When Darrow goes into it, where he describes it, and then just, again, staccato.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't talked about this. What I really appreciated about some of the previous books that we've read together is the staccato nature of descriptive sentences.
Mm-hmm.
And he describes the air shower, and then, period, it hurts, period.
Mm-hmm.
It was the description, and then separately, it was no bullshit, the experience. That reverberated, man.
Yeah, did it?
Yeah, it did.
It'll get cut out. Yeah.
No, it won't. I'm leaving it in now.
The experience, though, you're right, and it's also that's a shift from what we've been reading before, what we've talked about before. In first person point of view, you have so much more control over those kind of things.
You do. That's true.
And so that can come through a lot clearer in a narrative like this.
Yeah. But
dark matter is also
in different way. Was dark matter first person?
Yep. Jason Desson. Yeah, it was. Was it third person omniscient? I thought it was first person.
No, it was all third person.
Really? I thought. Anyway, okay, continue.
Never mind. I don't know where I'm going with that.
No, you're just talking about short description, the flushes.
Yeah, just the fact that, like, the period after describing what the process of taking the flush bath, like the air bath is, and then it hurts, with no more description. Like, you just know, like, it sucks, but, it's better than smelling like shit and piss all the time.
Yeah, because you have to piss yourself in your fry suit.
Yeah. They talk about that on page 1.
Yeah. Or 2.
Right? No, it's page 1. It's right away.
Yeah.
It's I smell my own stink inside my fry suit. Right after the first paragraph. The beginning of the second paragraph. Man, you'd think there'd be a better way, but I guess they just don't care.
Right.
To provide them with anything better.
Especially at the end of the chapter, we get a real sense that these people are expendable.
Yeah.
Especially in the way that they're even fed and rationed. So another thought. In chapter 3, when we hit chapter 3, I get a very Shire description.
What's the page number I can look at?
Dude, I have no idea. I'm following notes. I can double check.
It's like 20 mid-20s. It starts on 20.
I will mark it in the future. But yeah, so there's a very, like, throughout the chapter, there's the Shire feel, where it's describing the small town, the community, kind of even the warmth, everyone gathering around tables, kind of sitting down and drinking and being excited for the awarding of the laurel. Everything else around that has a very, the festival from the Lord of the Rings feel.
Right.
Or, sorry, Bilbo's birthday. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. Early on, very early on, I knew Io knew something was up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she has some information about the way things are run that she's keeping to herself, based on the way that she treats rations of bread, the way that she doesn't get excited about the Laurel or the prospect of it. Like, she knows what's up, but doesn't share.
You're so
and that
right.
becomes more and more clear as it goes on. But
I think
like I was tipped off right away when she. Like, I think it was from the bread. I think it was from the ration of bread.
Mm-hmm.
Is when I first thought, like, oh shit, like she knows something's up.
What I think is really interesting about that, I definitely agree with you. It also paints Darrow, right? Because Darrow then goes on to say things like, you know, there are other women who basically like whore themselves out for food, or like extra rations or other things and sleep around, and he doesn't think that Io's like that, so why would she have food to spare? And there's kind of this like question, but he also doesn't question her. But it shows that like Darrow even questions his like close alliances and friendships and things that matter. He's
Right.
always got kind of a cautious eye on things, which I think is
But
interesting.
he also, for this reason, he reminds me a lot of you, or you remind me a lot of him.
Sure.
In his just blind romanticism towards Io.
Oh fuck. Damn it. I've been sold out. No, I
Like, he is so fucking in love with Io in a way that it completely envelops his personality. And I've seen you go through that multiple times.
well, okay, so I think that
With
that's
multiple people.
I think that I understand obviously that you're calling me out in the public.
I'm not calling you out. Like
Okay.
that is it is a very like it's a very sweet personality trait to have. Like it is very loving and very compassionate towards like putting all of your compassion towards one person, and it's very intense. But it is a trait that I see in you.
That's totally fair. Yeah, I can't spoil anything, so I'm going to shut up. So I think that the whole that Io, you're 100% right. It's interesting that she does obviously have additional information. I think the very first tease of that is the flush where she comes back dirty, although we don't really understand because we don't really know what the Weavery is. We really don't have a good picture of a lot of the other things. They're kind of all mentioned so fast in passing. It feels like this section could have been 100 pages, but was instead 50. And
it feels like this section was cut down in editing.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I feel like part of that is first-timers book. Don't trust you, don't know what you're doing. Because each book subsequent, this book is like solidly on, I think, the 350 page mark, and then every book suddenly adds like 100 to 300 pages subsequently.
Okay.
So they all get significantly longer, and they kind of allow those muscles to flex a little bit to ensure that everything's described. But this definitely has that intro reader editor feel, where it's like, call the shit because we don't know if anyone's going to like you in the first place. So yeah, no, I definitely catch that on this read. The first read, I was very much like, I buzzed through this section. Like it was just like, okay, next. But there are some subtle things that are important here. One of the things that I think is really interesting is Darrow's fascination and perspective around the members of other colors in the society. He uses, like the colloquialism tin pots. But outside of the grays, it doesn't feel like he experiences other colors. What are your thoughts there? And how many colors do you think there are?
So we have mentions of the reds, the grays, the golds, obviously, the greens, and there's one other, I believe.
We get coppers in this section.
Copper. Copper. Was there another one?
I think that's it.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
Copper was something technological, wasn't it?
So the copper,
or was that green?
The copper that we get is kind of a bureaucrat. Green was running the cameras later.
Yep, that was it.
Yep. So the copper is Magistrate Poddigenus, who does initiates the flogging later, and the greens were manning the cameras.
And then gray is kind of just brutes.
Yeah, I mean soldiers to some degree. I would equate them.
Wait, what were the giant hulking dudes with 8 fingers?
Ooh, I didn't remember if they were mentioned, so I didn't want to spoil. Obsidians. Those are the Obsidians. Yeah,
that was it.
Yep, and they stand by Augustus's side.
It made me they reminded me of me, and it made me wish I had 8 fingers on each.
Dude, they're monsters. It's terrifying. But yeah, no, I definitely understand that. So yeah, I was just curious. What are your thoughts on Darrow's perspective on the other colors? Because obviously he rarely sees them. Where does he think they go?
But they're also so highly from a indoctrination standpoint, they are so on a pedestal that he averts his eyes at the golds.
Yeah.
It is so ingrained in them, presumably since birth, that they are lesser than and not worthy of the attention of golds or some of the higher colors in general. And it was really depressing.
Yeah. I totally agree with you.
It was a sign of total indoctrination and total control.
Yeah. The whole thing paints a very dehumanizing picture, which we know from real world example of a caste system in India. People fall into jobs and routines, and then they basically have inherited status over time in their specific roles in their families, and they cannot exceed or drop lower than, which has historically been terrible. Obviously, I don't have a great historical context in the entirety there, so I can't paint a perfect picture. But in this society, do you think that we have? How do you think that's evolved over time? How far in the future do you think we are? Both of those questions are relevant.
50 to 100 years is my guess.
100 years. Okay. 50 to 100.
Yeah. 100. I would guess colonization happened 50 years from now.
Okay.
So, based on just the way that everything's been written, 30 years was a couple generations. I feel like they described that as. When they were talking about the Gammas having the laurel, they had it for 33 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Which was more than anybody could really remember.
Right. Neryl's the only one who's even been alive that long that we've talked to on a character front.
Yeah. So, my guess is they colonized about 50 years into the future from whenever this was written. And then this is about 100 years into the future.
Got it. So you're saying
2070. When did this come out?
Well, it came out in 2014, I want to say.
Okay.
Seems about right. And then, so you're adding...
2060 to 2110.
Okay. All right. Yeah, 2014 is what it says on the inside cover. Yeah, okay. I see that. And then the secondary question there, though, was how did society separate? How do you think that happened? What really divides them? Because obviously there are physical differences that we see in the Obsidians later.
I think they were divided by time.
Okay.
I think they were these were the first people, and they were given a quota that was well beyond what was needed. And I'm thinking the next the next shuttle, so to speak. Well, not so to speak. The next shuttle from Earth to Mars was maybe a year or two behind them. Enough time for them to get settled and fear the surface but also enough time to really build society on the surface world once they have enough hydrogen 3.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I'm guessing it was a very short period of time.
Okay.
I think the Reds were the first. The Reds and the Greys. The Reds and the Greys arrived simultaneously, I think.
Yeah, kind of.
With the Greys being the slave drivers, so to speak.
It kind of has a Stanford prison experiment vibe to it between the Greys and the Reds. Yeah, the officers in the experiment versus the participants who were imprisoned, right? Mm-hmm. Even though they're the same people on the outset, because of power structures, they varied wildly. So, right. I do also, I understand that perspective, and I definitely see it. So, yeah. We...
and then they're obviously born into their own caste.
Yeah.
And so there was one comment, like one sentence where he talks about, I can't remember if it's his older brother or his uncle or something like that, but the math really didn't work out of how young they were between generations, and like, so his uncle, mm-hmm. or maybe it's his cousin. No, it's his uncle, I think.
Kieran,
it's like a couple of years older than him.
Yeah.
And then his uncle's son, his nephew, is also still on the crew and talking to him. And it doesn't feel like they should be on the same crew based on the year gap.
Yeah, because it almost feels like there's a bigger wisdom and knowledge gap that happens in fewer years.
No. I mean, just time-wise. If 34 is the oldest person on the crew and 13 is the youngest, that's a 20-year
it's not 13.
Discrepancy.
He's not 13.
13's the youngest on the crew, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
But he has his nephew talking to him, and his cousin and his brother talking to him, or whatever it is. Yeah, I think it's his brother,
Kieran,
and his nephew,
right,
are both on the crew, and it doesn't feel like there's enough time for those to both coexist, and for him to still be 16. It feels very odd.
If you had a kid immediately at 14 or 13, it would work.
No, but his brother's only 3 years older than him.
No, but it's not... Okay, so...
No, his brother is 3 years older than him.
Correct. Kieran is 3 years older.
And he has a son that talks to him, talks to
I think it's Neryl's son.
On the job site.
Pretty sure it's Neryl's son, not Kieran's.
It's Neryl's
Kieran has a daughter that comes up way later.
Okay.
But I think she's just
the way I read it, I was really confused because I thought it was... I thought it was his brother's son.
No, it's
on the job site. I'm like, how does this math work out?
Pretty sure it's his cousin, and pretty sure it's Neryl.
Okay.
Neryl's, and he is Neryl's nephew.
That makes more sense.
Darrow is Neryl's nephew. So that's where that kind of there's a lot of genealogy painted over in a small period of time, and especially with kind of the quote cultural quote differences. It is tough to map out.
Right. But that was, I knew I was missing something.
Yeah.
But I didn't really want to go back and try to reread it and figure it out. So I just kept going.
So we've been on this for a bit, but like I had mentioned the Shire feeling earlier, right? Like the community warmth and kind of the question of the colors and a lot of that start to.
I didn't get any warmth. I didn't get any warmth out of the community at all.
I only in chapter 3 when they're talking about everyone sitting down waiting for the laurel does it feel warm like the Shire does, because everyone's kind of excited. There's some dancing going on.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. So that feels like the Shire. That's really the only moment that feels like that happy-go-lucky energy. Song and dance.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I was kind of when I read that the first time, I was kind of waiting for a wise old wizard to arrive. Like I was really like, is this going to be a carbon copy of Lord of the Rings in space? Like I really kind of like was leaning into the idea of a Gandalf wizard arriving, right? Yeah. Not that there are Jedis in this, but it'd be interesting. Or rip off, either way.
Gandalf the Nebula.
Yeah. Anyway, that was my final thought on the Shire bit. In chapter 3, I caught myself when Darrow was reflecting, thinking about the same sort of changes that happen over the course of 5 years. You know, how judgment and wisdom get conflated as we age out of childhood. That's on page 21 when he starts to kind of talk about those things. But think about like 5 years ago and how dramatically, we don't need to get into it, but just thinking about the kinds of shifts that happen over 5 years, even though it doesn't feel that long when you're living it. Yeah. We were 21 5 years ago. We were just able to buy alcohol legally.
5 years ago, I started professionally brewing beer.
Yeah, right? It's a big deal. 6 years ago, I started a sales career.
I was able to buy the beer that I was trying to emulate in my brewing, which felt so weird. But also, it was free. It was so freeing. It was such, 21 in America is such a strange turning point, not only legally but socially and interfamilially.
Mm-hmm.
At least within my family.
Yeah.
Suddenly being able to talk about drinking with my parents.
Yeah. I mean,
it was a weird thing.
It's a big deal.
And I probably could have ahead of time, but I didn't. And then suddenly I did, and suddenly I'm hired as a professional alcohol producer.
Yeah,
having only experienced alcohol for a couple months.
Quote. Air quotes around that whole thing, but also we don't recommend going out of your way to find alcohol if you're underage.
Absolutely. No, it is very difficult.
We are not doctors.
To buy grain and yeast and hops and get tap water and boil it together and follow recipes online to make your own really good beer. But it's not easy to do. Don't do that. It's way too hard. And you'll be disappointed. I'm lying.
But yeah, the 5 years
Crossland
of judgment would tell you, and wisdom gained would tell you to brew your own beer in larger batches, right? That's the wisdom gained.
Oh yeah,
right.
Never. If you're gonna start brewing your own beer, start at 5 gallons because 1 gallon is so wasteful and really frustrating. It's way easier to do 5 gallons. You get less waste, you get more product, and it's you just need your large burner on your stove instead of your medium one. That's the only difference. It takes the same amount of time. You need a bigger pot, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Crossland and I made a terrible fucking beer that we got a pint out of in our 1 gallon batch. True. We named it Swamp Thing because that's what it tasted like and looked like. And that's the worst beer I've ever brewed. And I was 24.
I don't know if that's true.
On my part. That was at...
But I said, I don't know if that's true on my part. I feel like I've definitely brewed worse.
You don't know if what's true. You brewed worse?
Yeah, that was my joke.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe my bacon amber was worse.
Sounds gross. So...
It was.
To the book. We approach the laurel. Darrow invariably doesn't get the laurel because despite the society being presented as a meritocracy, as we've talked about, it isn't. It's about overall productivity, and we also see the shaming of the other two clans. Any more comments on the side of the laurel? I feel like we hit this.
What was the comment? Maybe you'll learn not to dally.
Yeah.
Or dilly.
Yeah.
Dilly dally, whatever. They lost 8 people each.
Right. And he's
they lost half of
you made a small mistake and you won't fuck up again, right? And it's dude, our people died.
They lost half of their mining crew.
Yeah, not a good. It's
that's not dilly dallying.
Right. That's the difference. Is these people read it as though it's going to be life in the future, life as everything else. But the reality of the coppers is it is no more than numbers on a ledger and efficiency.
So my question to that is, We know Darrow's thought on it. Do we know how well accepted the official story is within the tribes, or do they all know it's kind of bullshit and they're just trying to survive?
Well, I think that brings up an interesting point, because we also get, just a bit after this, we get our first presentation of the Sons of Ares, right? Like on the HC, which is an uprising that appears to be happening of Reds, where they're like bombing townships basically and like trying to blow things up. And it gets presented as like counter propaganda to some degree from Octavia and the society in general. It gets presented as like, why would you hurt your own? So that's interesting, you know, given also the context of what we're seeing right now in the real world. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of dicey. I feel like there is obviously enough of the population that agrees and is so brainwashed that they can't see past what's going on. But there are even Darrow. Like, Darrow literally doesn't see it. Darrow doesn't believe it. Darrow denies it when it's brought up by EO later. You know, like, he is literally in it for that exact reason, which I think is good to get into in a second here, and we can kind of break that down, because I feel like we can get to a lot of the general thought. So we hit the next chapter, and Darrow and EO make their way up. It's the surprise from EO, because Darrow's fell through, and she said she had 2 surprises for him. We hit chapter 4, and the big surprise is, yes, we are on Mars, and that some of Mars is obviously good to go. And Darrow leads off with the word sky. It was once just a word, and now he's actually seeing the sky and the stars for the first time. And we get,
I mean, he talked about before, like early on. The stars are something that neither me nor any other red like me will ever see. Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
I can't remember that.
It was definitely something like that.
Oh, here it is. Page 5. But she could be made from air, from the ether that binds the stars in a patchwork. Not that I've ever seen stars. No red from the mining colonies see stars.
Yeah. And it's just like stars.
I think also talking about EO.
Yeah. So, it is definitely romanticizing EO. If that's what you're trying to get back to here. Yeah. But a lot of this chapter is kind of romanticizing the idea of EO, because it's important.
I mean, yeah.
It's his like number one connection to humanity, and when he loses it, he loses everything. So we hit chapter 4, and literally the note that I wrote on my little tiny post-it flag was sex, but also lies. And I just like, we get this kind of big conversation. Yes, we're on Mars, obviously, as I'd mentioned. Darrow and EO have sex, but they were caught while trying to escape. We get really, I think, the first very flowery section of Pierce Brown prose as well. He really does a great job of delivering kind of a romantic scenery, even through a sometimes brutal lens. But right here, we get kind of a romantic for romantic's sake, because we do have kind of a sweet moment. And this is maybe the only one.
I can see that. I can believe that.
It's maybe the only one without ruining anything. But yeah.
No, I don't think that ruins anything. I think the scene after this ruins that for it.
That's true. Definitely sets the tone.
It does. She is my land. She is my kin, my love. Mm-hmm. Like, he revolves around her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Entirely. And I think
EO drives his life
entirely. Like, he lives to win the laurel, to like extra satisfy EO and make sure that she's fed, not thinning, which he talks about a number of times over the chapters. He's just trying to ensure.
There's the later on in this section, there's the quote from the inside front cover of the dust cover of the book, which is, "I live for the dream that my children will be born free," she says, "that they will be what they like, that they will own the land their father gave them. I live for you, I say sadly. Io kisses my cheek. Then you must live for more.
Dude, and that gives me chills because of it gives me chills fundamentally, and it might not do that for you right now, but it is.
No, like she is. This is more cementing that she knows way more about the society they live in than he does.
Yeah. So there are lingering questions there that we'll hit at the end with PJ's predictions. Man, Darrow very quickly realizes, it's not just the surprise, but it's also kind of leverage in the way that Io sees them, like you just mentioned. Over the course of the conversation, we come to understand the meaning of the title section, really. The reason that it's called Slave is not so much about Darrow's perception of reality, but it's Io's perception. It's the way that Io sees things is that they're all slaves, not that Darrow thinks that they're slaves, because Darrow doesn't think that he's a slave.
Right.
He believes
Darrow,
he's living for a family,
wholehearted,
like you said.
Like, he believes everything that he's told, essentially.
Yeah.
And if not everything, a good majority of it.
Right. He's an indoctrinated sheep for the most part. And that's what I find fascinating about this introduction to with Darrow, is he isn't conventionally flawed in most of the usual ways that, like, Luke Skywalker is, right? Luke Skywalker is a novice who isn't, I think they call it Gary Stu, if it's a male character that just knows how to do everything and can manage everything. Mary Sue being the opposite. He's closer to a Gary Stu, actually, like right off the bat, but also he's a sheep. Like he is a stupid ass Gary Stu who doesn't realize what he can do if he broke out of the mold, because he loves comfort. He loves his initial worldview of things. Mm-hmm. But he can't shake the worldview. He can't shake his love for Io. He lives and loves Io, and that's what it stands for.
I think you're a little bit misspoken in saying that he loves his worldview. I think he hasn't had the exposure,
sure,
to understand that there's anything beyond his worldview.
That makes sense. I mean, yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, you're right. He doesn't have the exposure to see beyond his worldview because he's content with his present.
Yeah. Because he has no reason not to be.
Right.
Because he hasn't had exposure to anything else.
Yeah.
That's better than or different than his worldview, other than Gamma and their winning of the laurel.
Right.
Like that is the only overarching difference in his life between clans, is who has the laurel.
Definitely.
And it's always Gamma.
So we hit kind of the end of this conversation where they roll back to Darrow's dad dying, right? And he specifically says on page 33, what is the point of dying? Dying for a cause doesn't do a bloody damn thing. It just robbed us of his laughter. And
I do like the word bloody damn, by the way.
Yeah, that's sort of like a slang. It's a nice Irish twist.
It's not a slang, like it's a
colloquialism. It's a
expletive.
locality.
Like, it's an expletive that just kind of uniquely evolved into this society.
Right.
But doesn't have to be explained because it is the kind of conglomeration of two very well-known expletives around the world. And that was something kind of seamless that anchored me to Earth adjacent.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense.
To Earth society adjacent.
Right.
Like, this is close enough that I completely understand where it came from. But it's different enough that I know that it's not actually used in any society I know of as a single standalone expletive.
Right. True. Fair.
it was very well done in that sense.
I think it does a good job of describing the. I like that you allude to that because I think that it does a good job of. It does make it Earth adjacent. It also makes it kind of the Irish adjacent with bloody, being a very like UK/Irish thing. To throw in bloody in front of things is almost an adverb to whatever the swear
as
is.
an accentuation.
Yeah, adverb.
Shh.
It's fine.
You and your fancy language shit. I don't know.
It's fine. So,
I know math.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's continue.
Okay, math. So she comes back to the previous statement with death isn't simply like you say. Emptiness is life without freedom, Darrow. Of which, is certainly kind of the core argument that she makes with all of her choices.
Man, she echoes a lot of shit that I believe in.
Right? Yeah. No, she's like, a great character.
She says a lot of stuff that really, like, I want to scream about current American society.
So here's the interesting thing that I think about from this entire chapter's perspective, from the overall overview, is we are looking out from Darrow's eyes, but especially in this section, we're fixed on Io so as to explore what Io really thinks, not what Darrow thinks. We're given what Darrow thinks, but really we're questioning what's going on with Io.
Right.
We get into the final-ish chunk of the book, which rolls pretty quickly from chapter to chapter. So we get into the first song, which is chapter 5. This section breaks my heart every single time that I've read it, that I've heard it. The words to Darrow feel final, and they kind of foreshadow her eventual decision. And that still rings with me, just the line about Mars's gravity, obviously. But she also says, break the chains, my love. And that's the last thing that we know that she says to him.
And she doesn't say it, she melds it to him.
It implies that last note.
No, I mean, he said she mouths break the chains. Right. Like, she doesn't say it out loud.
Right, but we had it earlier in a conversation. Right?
We did. Yeah. I mean, like, it's parroting what
was earlier.
Not
parroting.
Not parodying.
Yeah.
But parrot. Like,
yep, heard.
Yes.
Understood.
And it's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous last word, I feel like. She knows what she's doing, and he knows what she's doing. And he knows her well enough to know that he can't stop her.
Yeah, and that's sort of the brutal reality of this all, is like he knows that she's stubborn enough to stay the course no matter what he shouts, yells, does anything. He'll make a fool of himself and be punished even worse for saying things at this point because it's televised. Like anything that he does is going to be infinitely worse. We kind of get that perspective. We also get Magistrate Podiginus, which we talked about earlier, the copper, who announces and addresses the whole televised punishment, a way of showing everyone what happens if you step out of line. He does give a straight-up law and order speech. He shouts, law, order, some other word, because I'm not on the page. There are three phrases, and it just literally is Trump.
Jesus, where is it?
So it's on 38. Right. Order, discipline, law. These are the things which empower our race. Cursed is the creature who breaks with these compacts. And it's a much more formal way of saying the fourth graders' interpretation of events. But yeah.
Exactly.
I like there's an appreciation there, which is obviously like this is a tyrannical structure built around these folks. It's also just scary to see the tyrannical structure evoke itself in reality.
Right.
So we also meet our second gold, and this time in person, our first gold being Octavia. There's an incredible fascination that Darrow has, despite knowing the punishment is coming his way. He sees the scar on Nero Au Augustus's face and talks about the peerless scarred a little bit. So I hadn't mentioned this earlier, but I think it's important to talk about. There are historical connotations that come with the name Octavia, as well as Nero Augustus.
So Nero, I'm not super well versed in Roman history.
Thankfully for you, I am.
Yep. I do know that Nero is regarded as kind of the beginning of the fall of the Roman Empire. Which took like 400 years, but like it started with Nero.
Right.
I don't know the implications of the name Octavius.
Octavia.
Or Octavia. Octavia.
Yeah, so
I'm assuming it's derived off of Octavius, correct?
No.
Or is it Octavia?
It's Octavia.
No.
Yeah, so she herself was this entire other thing. Nero was
I'm a sexist piece
was
of
the
shit.
inheritor of like the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Was related to Claudius. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
His mother was also Agrippina. Agrippina is the great-granddaughter of Octavia Minor, of whom Octavia is named after. There's Octavia the Elder and Octavia Minor. Octavia the Younger, which is who I believe this character most closely resembles, is the fourth wife of Mark Antony, who also like birthed the line that gave birth to Caligula, as well as Agrippina, which we talked about, and also makes her the great-great-great-great-grandmother of Emperor Nero. So kind of a descendant of. There's like minor thoughts of inbreeding here. Not that actually happened, but there are like. There's a perspective of the Golds maybe being descendants of each other.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless, interesting.
Inbred fucks.
Inbred fucks, the Golds are. Do you think that they're actually inbred fucks?
I'm sure there's some of that.
Okay. So the brutality of the lashing that Darrow receives is tough. Like it's a brutal scene. Like even his uncle is lashing him. You have people from each clan are lashing him. He gets 42 and
48.
48. Sorry, 48.
And then they make the fake like stopping him or stopping it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh no, he's had enough, but he knows he's had his 48.
Yeah. Right. Everyone else wasn't counting, but he's been counting. And then we immediately transition from that into like Eos, right? And so then Eos steps up, and he's talking to Augustus Nero. He's begging him, and they gag and bind him with like a stone gag, and he ruins his teeth on it. And there's just this image of him like grinding his molars as he sees his wife like whipped. Well, not at this point, but as like he's waiting and begging and pleading for this moment to stop. Yeah, just the damage that he's done to his teeth. For me, that resonates because there's something about losing bone. There's something about teeth fucked up that just.
Where is the comment on the teeth getting fucked up? Because I see on page 41. Bridge forces a knot of stone into my mouth. Mm-hmm. I gag and cry. I don't see any comment on him fucking up his teeth, which you have written in.
Oh, he definitely does. Give me 2 seconds here.
I'm sure it exists. Like I believe you, but I'm also not.
So yeah, 43. Right, so right after the song is saying, I can barely breathe past the stone, it chips my molars, tears stream down my face, no voice rises from the crowd, I see mother trembling with anger, Kieran clutches his wife close, Nero stares, Lauren weeps. God, it's also somewhere else. That's not.
So
that's
all
not,
it says is I chip.
That's not the only reference to it, though. Where'd you say you saw the other bit?
41. 41. Middle, like Gag that wretched thing.
Bridge forces a... Yep.
Bridge forces a knot of stone into my mouth. I gag and cry. I didn't get, like, that it was actually made of stone. I guess it makes sense if it's just like a stone wrapped in rope.
Oh, it's on chapter 6 after it's on 44.
Okay.
So for you, I do not react. I am anger, I am hatred, everything. But I hold her gaze even as they take her away and fit the noose around her neck. I look up at the bridge, and he quietly takes the gag from my mouth. My teeth will never be the same. And so it gives the impression that he was like sitting there chewing on the stone, anguished, like just trying to kind of like fight through it. It's not strictly mentioned, but obviously between the molars chipping and everything else, it's like, Jesus Christ, gagging someone with a stone.
Sense.
Like,
yeah, that makes sense. I was just, it was spread out enough that I didn't make all of the connections that you pointed out in our notes.
Totally fine.
But yeah, like stones are harder than bones.
Of course. And I think what's important here is to mark sort of the brutality and the unrelenting nature that this will bring up in some of the grinding fashions. This isn't the most descriptive of them, but that is a hallmark of the series, and it only gets worse / better, depending on your opinion. So, what'd you think of Io's song, which is important? It's it's her act of rebellion.
It's important. It's a beautiful song of rebellion, but that was on
42,
page 42. It made me question why it was forbidden versus everything else. Like I get the kind of themes of discontent with the ruling class, but to be the only song that's forbidden seemed odd.
So we know that there are forbidden dances.
I'd like more explanation on that.
They're like forbidden dances around death, right? Because we know that
There's one.
Neril taught that.
There's one forbidden dance and there's one forbidden song.
So far as we know, right? At this point.
So far as we've been exposed to,
right? But she chooses this song specifically.
But I think Daryl mentions it that like there is one forbidden song and one forbidden dance. I think he mentions it earlier.
Yes,
on,
so the forbidden dance is
when he's talking about his father.
A death's dance, right? And this is a song about death as well. And so there's something forbidden about the religion around death that the Reds have, which they make mention of a couple of times. It's not so incredibly explicit here, but they talk about the veil, right? So especially in the song and the poem.
They do. They talk about it in the song or poem or whatever you want to call it.
And the veil is almost this theory of afterlife. And down in the veil, hear the reapers swing, the reapers swing, the reapers swing.
It's heaven. It's the afterlife, whatever they believe in. It is their out of humanity location.
Yeah. That last verse, though. My son,
for our. Oh yeah.
I was gonna say, my son, remember the chains when gold ruled with iron reins. When he roared and twisted and screamed, for ours a veil of better dreams.
So this section, like it's only 3 paragraphs. That's a third of the song.
Yeah.
But they talk about in the passage before, they'll cut out anything they deem like what was the term? Keep recording. We'll cut out anything.
The veil? Oh, continue recording. We'll edit out the parts we find intolerable.
Yeah. So, what parts of that do they find tolerable, and where's the line? Because it's all pretty damning towards the golds.
Right. But if you also control the networks, you know it's going to go out in the end. So
No, I know. So, like, if you, Crossland, were a gold in charge of editing this song after it's been sung and recorded for broadcast, what would you cut out?
the entirety of the third verse. You could keep the first two. Looking at it,
I don't know if you could.
Yeah. These are all like about death. Like it's just like we tried to do our best against like what was happening. We couldn't. Blah blah. And that's right away in the first verse, obviously. But I feel like it's more subtle, and you're assuming a lot of intelligence on people's behalf to be able to infer messages. Which obviously, if they listen to vague threats like law and order, they don't perceive the rest of the message.
Against their greed.
I know. I was alluding to that with the Law and Order comments.
Like that's
like
I feel like that would get cut out.
Maybe,
but you'd have to cut out the rest of it.
No, you could just cut out that line. Like you just edit around it. Think about like video editors, like whatever.
Then it's not a song.
Yeah, it doesn't. You
of all people. I know.
Like that's the thing here is they think about that, and then in the next chapter we get presented with a like sort of hacked version, right, that comes out, which is the whole thing. It's the whole song.
Yeah.
It's EO's song. It's EO's dream being broadcasted across the HC, across to everyone who can hear, right?
Yeah.
So I think that while correct in your assumption that like, yeah, it was a little overzealous of Nero in classic Nero sense.
No. I'm not saying it's overzealous. I'm saying if I were Nero, I don't know how much I'd actually leave.
You wouldn't leave anything. You just cut it out and just execute the woman, because it would be like, yeah, she committed crimes, whatever, kill her. They don't need to know the facts of what happened.
Right.
But the reality is that she still sung, someone recorded it, they got a hold of it, and then broadcasted it. That's the reality.
Well, I mean, that's the reality, but they were given permission to broadcast it while they were recording. Yeah. So,
I
don't know if that's a fair argument.
I get it. I think that this is a controversial point. Not a controversial. This is a critical point to some degree, because I think Nero's move, if he wasn't so prideful, would have been to have cut her off and to have prevented her from singing. But because he believes in his own power and his own stature inside of the system and society, he's like, whatever, we can fix it later. It doesn't matter. Like, she can do whatever she wants, and with her little plight of life, like shoo shoo mouse, whatever, I'm gonna hit you with a hammer in a second anyway.
I can get behind that.
But reality is that other people had cameras. That's not really the reality in this case, but basically other people had access to the Greens network, and they were able to take the video and then pilot it out. So,
yeah.
What do you think about the act of rebellion on the whole, though?
It was so anticlimactic.
Really?
Because of how indoctrinated everybody else was. There was nobody to resonate the tone that she set.
Interesting.
Like she said something so powerful that probably rang through the hearts of everybody in the Red Gate.
Yep. Well,
but it was kind of decapitated because of the fear and indoctrination of everybody looking on.
And in most circumstances, totally agree with you, Nero literally challenged them. He's like, anyone else want to sing along? Like, is anyone else going to do anything about this? and everyone else kind of just
I really
back.
wanted to know. I really wanted to know what he would have done if somebody did.
Yeah,
it would have been another hanging. Like, I know what he would have done.
Well, and we kind of get that answer though, because Darrow does break the rules, you know, and ends up after a drink with Uncle Nero going and taking her corpse down ahead of time and burying her in a place where she shouldn't be, obviously.
One of 5 ever buried.
Yeah, that's telling.
And like, I thought the coolest description of it was him, like, pulling the body past the people in the silk.
Oh yeah, in the Webbery.
Silk mines in the Webbery, and him saying, like, they won't say anything. They understand.
They know her, right? Because she is a Webbery woman.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. The whole thing, that whole section is so tough. It's very, it's hard to get through because it's also dark from Darrow's perspective, where he just suddenly feels very hopeless from this, like, you know, not necessarily hopeful, but like content.
He was like, she was the light of his life
in a non like ironic sense, or non like cliche
right.
sense.
Like, not in a way of like
non cliche.
Like, she dictates what I think. Like she was
his son.
The positivity of his existence. Like, she is who he existed.
In this entire chapter, he knows that he's going to die for what he wants to do and what he needs to do for his wife, and he's resigned himself to it. He sneaks out behind like family members. Neril gets it. Neril mentions a couple of different things, which is interesting. We get like a family drink between Neril and Darrow, where they talk about Dancer and the afterlife. So,
stepping backwards a bit, we know the age of the males.
Yep.
How old is Darrow's mother? We don't know that.
Yeah, I don't think it's concrete, but she's about Neril's age. She's a little bit younger. Okay. I want to say she's 30-ish in context. And I don't think that ruins anything.
So she would have been 14 when Darrow was born. Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. But anyway, continue.
No, I was speaking to, we get a couple of names that like Uncle Nero talks about. He talks about the veil. He talks about greeting people because he knows what Darrow's going to do. He knows that he's going to like go off and die. And so he's like, when you get there, make sure that you talk to Dancer and your dad and like other people. Like he makes all of these offhanded mentions, and kind of like nods along. They take a drink, so we take a drink. That's the rule. That's our drink. Darrow takes a drink.
My drinks are
sure.
gone.
That's fine.
I could go grab a bottle.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I'll be right back. All right. I got my Teeling. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh.
Yeah. Yo entiendo. So,
yep.
God, this whole thing. We skipped it earlier, but when she mouths like "live for more,"
yep.
And then he just decides to like kill himself. It's like, you're not really living for more because you're gonna get yourself hung.
So, like, that's what's fucked up. That's the one thing that really caught me off guard. Is he fucking dies.
Yeah. Right? Like, on the page, sorry.
Like,
go ahead.
Of everything that I was talking about, like, everything I was thinking about the, like, progression of the character. I hadn't considered the character's death as being part of the first chapter of the fucking book.
Right.
or first section.
So I think it pays to end this on the quote that he dies on, and this chunk before you start talking about it. My body falls, rope flays my neck, my spine creaks, needles lace my lumbar. Kieran stumbles forward and Neryl shoves him away. With a wink, he touches my feet and pulls. Consciously, he thinks, I hope they do not bury me. And the section ends. And that's just like, it's a glorious thing because it's the third time it's happened. We didn't strictly talk about it, but obviously Darrow pulled Eo's feet to kill her. And he also killed his father, ended his father's life. It's not killed, but like just finished her off, and now it's his turn.
The way you read that was surprisingly more beautiful than what I have written on my page.
Really?
I thought we had the same exact copy of the book.
We do, unless I skipped something.
So let me read that. Like exactly what you read.
My body falls forward.
My body falls. Rope flays my neck. My spine creaks. Needles lace my lumbar. Kieran stumbles forward. Uncle Neryl shoves him away. With a wink, he touches my feet and pulls. I hope they do not.
Yeah, that's exactly what I read. I added consciously he thinks, and that was really just like a that was to
that was better
perspective.
That was better.
Well, that's
like
third person narration versus first person.
It is, but it was more emotion because there's this last section is so devoid of emotion. That was a glimmer of emotion.
But I think it's so staccato because it, like part of the strength of this end here, part of the strength that I think Pierce Brown brings to this is that sort of staccato emotion, which I think comes through in this. And I think part of the first person versus a third person narrative is you also have to read between the lines a little bit because you're kind of laced in their personality.
Yeah, no. Well, okay, yes, you have to read between the lines, but you also have to analyze what's actually written.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can't necessarily... you can read between the lines, but you can't necessarily know what the character is thinking unless it's written.
All right. Well,
so the consciously I think part of it that you added, I think strengthens the section.
Okay. So I understand what you're saying. I agree, but also I think that it's almost implied in a first person sense. And the reason
it is, but it also goes against the way that this entire section has been written so far, which is why I was kind of jealous that you had
never
different
he
experience. But even though yours
was the same, I just quoted it out differently in the way that I was writing because I was planning on breaking it up into like two parts. And so I broke it up with like he thinks consciously. Part of that, like I like first person writing. I also like third person writing. And I you can actively see the difference as you start to experience more perspectives along the writing line and the omniscient versus limited versus first person limited perspective. And so you can gather that this is what he's thinking despite it being explicitly labeled as such. And part of the reason that so the rationale that I'm getting here to is we can assume to some degree that he lives because he thought this so as for us to receive some kind of a diary, some kind of a note to be able to continue via his perspective. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are first-person novels which end on a note like this, Wool being one of them, which is one of my favorite from recent history. There are a couple of places where that novel ends with a first-person narrative being like, and then my neck broke. and you're just like, oh shit, well, on to the next one, I guess. and the story continues. But this gives like a preamble almost, because it still sounds like he's describing it. And because he's describing it, it feels like you're going to move forward with him. So with that, we move into the new section, PJ's Predictions. We'll figure out something better. It's fine. We're going to move into your predictions. You can cut that shit out. It's fine.
No,
well,
I'm not
okay.
going to. It makes you sound bad.
Yeah.
All right. So
did you
my
hit that
predictions,
fart, man? Dude, like that was like a 2-second fart. Come on. Continue. Your predictions.
So I think we get into some Buddhism shit.
Really?
And Darrow wakes up reborn in an infantile body of a gold.
So like his consciousness gets transferred.
Exactly.
Okay.
So he is in the physical body of a gold member of society, and he can blend in entirely, but he still maintains his memories of what it means to be a red and the inherent like identity of being a red, and the fight and the drive and the grit that it takes to be one, to be a helldiver, to be so ruthless in not against your fellow humanity, but against nature, against emotion, against pain. Like he is a ruthless individual as a helldiver, and I think that follows him.
Okay.
But I think he also maintains the memory of EO and of his family and of his father, and I think he uses it as a springboard for revolution.
Okay. I dig. With that, any particular favorite moment and or what, if any, impact do you think this section has on the massive future of this series? Right, we know at this point that it's 6 books long, at least. What do you think this chunk has impact on?
So we have been exposed to the Forbidden Song, and we have been told about the Forbidden Dance that has not yet shown its face, other than in memory of Daryl's father.
Darrow. It sounds like Daryl.
No, not Daryl.
Darrow. Okay.
Darrow's father. The memory of Darrow's father.
Darrow's father?
Being Darrow's father.
Give you shit. Continue.
Being executed for the expression of the Forbidden Dance. That has not yet been described, but we have the description of the Forbidden Song. So those, I feel like at some point will either, I think those will come together. He will have the recording of EO singing the Forbidden Song, and I think he'll dance to it at some point.
Okay.
I don't know if he'll get reprimanded for it, because genuinely, I think that the only people that these rules are imposed against are the Reds. So I think as a Gold reborn, if that's what happens, he'll have the memory of these forbidden songs and dances. And he'll be able to express them without fatal consequence.
Okay.
That's
agreed,
my prediction.
Agreed. No, that's it. That's a good leading off point. So, any favorite moment? What'd you love the most? Anything stick out to you?
The interaction between Neril and Darrow, as Darrow was leaving sneakily his house towards Eo's
Was that your
body.
favorite?
That was
Okay.
my favorite. Was the conversation and the interaction, and just the humanity between the two.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Of like you and the conversation about his mother saying like she knew you would escape. She knew you'd leave, but she's there to let you make your own decisions and make your own mistakes. And that's a what's the word for it?
Sword point.
No, like a conversation about the woman's place in the world, in this society. But it's also a conversation about the way a mother raises her son.
Yeah.
And at some point needs to let go of coddling him. Knowing that like he is an adult in this society. And he is free to make his own choices and mistakes. As much as it may hurt him or her.
Okay. All right. I particularly love that the section that sticks out to me is really the whole like hanging thing with on Mars. You have to twist the feet to break the neck. They let the loved ones do it. Just stands out as a caustic moment. Not necessarily for the whole series, but just something that reads so starkly different because of the familial necessity on a death penalty, right? So like the family has to finish up like what the government started. Like, oh my God, could not imagine, but we've hit this point.
Well, but you pointed out before they don't have to.
Right.
So if they disagree,
they wouldn't,
and they'd let them suffer. I hadn't let that kind of perspective come through me. And I was still unsure about whether it was compassion or brutality to force a family member to give the killing blow.
I think from a red, it's compassion.
But I hadn't considered the fact that they'd still die anyway.
Yeah.
It would just take a lot longer.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's tough. That sticks out to me in this section. And obviously, not obviously, EO and EO's dream is a big kind of encouraging revolutionary moment, potentially, provided the right sticks grab the fire, so to speak. So with that, we talk about next week for just a brief second. So next week, we'll be reading part 2, Reborn, in its entirety. So if you're with us in our regular book, you're going to read all the way through part 2. If you're with us in the audiobook, part 2. Jesus Christ, it's just through part 2. There are no page numbers, no nothing. Just read part 2. So that is through chapter 18 and up until the part 3 marker, in case you are lost.
If you are in the same like ISBN number that we got, what page? ESPN. What the fuck ever. What page is that?
I'm telling you in a second. I have it broken out actually in our document, but I don't have it on our shit. I want to say, okay, yep, 139 is where we flip into part 3. So read to 138.
So we've got 90
yep,
pages.
So now we hit the long haul. So now we're gonna hit long haul sections. It'll be great, BJ.
Yeah, part 3 is labeled gold.
Well, you didn't want to talk about that until now, but it's okay.
Well, we talked about it last time.
It's a little bit of a hint. It's a little bit of a hint. Okay.
Hey,
we're getting there. We're getting there.
I've got to look at where I'm going to in order to like know when to stop. So I've got it's.
Thank you for listening to Words and Whiskey.
We hope you've built up a tolerance to us. Subscribe to us on your preferred platform like Overcast, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, or whatever else you use.
And check us out at our website, wordsandwhiskey.show. We filled our top shelf with our favorite cocktail recipes as well as other important information for you. Check us out on Instagram and Twitter at wordswhiskeypod. All those links and more can be found in our show notes.
A 5-star rating on the platform of your choosing goes a long way to springing us up on them leaderboards and getting us noticed.
We're just two dudes helping encourage people to read and get out of their comfort zone while thinking critically about literature.
Thanks for listening, and we bloody damn better see you next week.